Hey, what's up guys, Adam here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my ongoing decision to switch from using a hybrid camera to a cinema camera. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so I've been doing videography now for just under 10 years. I actually started using this camera right here, which is the Hitachi DZHV, followed by a random string of numbers. I'll place them somewhere in this video. That was a 1080p camcorder at the time. It actually allowed you to do 720p at 60 frames a second, as well as 480p at 100 frames a second. Probably laughable statistics by now, or by today's standards, but it was pretty good for then. It also had 23 times optical zoom, as well as a HDMI output, so a fairly good camera for that price point. So once I became more confident with video editing and production, I actually invested in my first DSLR camera, and that was the Nikon D3100. And then from that point, I actually moved about a year later into getting the Nikon D3200, which was the bigger brother to the D3100. And then about another year later, I actually got myself my first Canon DSLR, which was the Canon T3i. And then more recently, now about 2 years ago, I actually got the Sony a6300, and that's what I've been using ever since. Now, if you're someone that's into videography, I'm presuming you are since you're watching this video, then you'll probably realize that the majority of the cameras that I mentioned are either DSLR cameras or hybrid cameras, more geared towards photography as opposed to videography. And the reason I actually opted for DSLR cameras at the time was, number one, they were a lot cheaper than, of course, cinema cameras, because cinema cameras still are and were at the time very expensive, especially if you're someone who was getting into videography at the start or even at intermediate level. But also, a lot of the DSLR cameras at the time were a lot better in terms of image quality in comparison to their camcorder equivalents, even camcorders that were equally priced to a DSLR camera. And there was two reasons why the DSLR camera outperformed a camcorder of a similar price. And the first reason was down to that crop sensor that a lot of DSLR cameras used, whereas a lot of camcorders were using much smaller sensors, which meant they were more susceptible to noise, as well as not performing too well in low light. They tended to use micro four thirds sensors, or sensors that are even smaller than that. And in addition to that, what you'd also find with camcorders priced similarly to DSLRs is that a lot of them did not allow you to have interchangeable lenses. So very few camcorders in the same price range as a DSLR camera at the time had interchangeable lenses. They were all fixed lens, which means that you couldn't actually go out and get better quality lenses. You're pretty much stuck with the camcorder's lens that it came with. But fast forward to now, when I'm starting to take video a lot more seriously on the professional side of things, you can definitely start to notice some of the downfalls that you're going to have or face when it comes to working with hybrid cameras. So I'm going to be mainly focusing on the top 5 reasons as to why I'm deciding to switch from a hybrid camera to a cinema camera. So let's get right into it. So comment number 5, we have built-in ND or neutral density filters. Now, before I even go into why I would want to opt for built-in ND filters, I want to first and foremost talk about what are ND filters. And in layman's terms, an ND filter, or the purpose of an ND filter, is to cut down on the amount of light that comes through the lens onto the back of the sensor. Now, the reason you'd want to use this type of filter is if you are shooting where the conditions are incredibly bright or the lighting is incredibly harsh, and without using the filter, you will get a completely blown out or washed out or even overexposed image. So a way to cut down on that is to use an ND filter. And then the whole purpose of using ND filters, it means that you do not have to actually stop down the aperture in the lens. So when you stop down the aperture in the lens, it actually reduces how much shallow depth of field you can have within your image. So using a filter will prevent you from having to stop down the lens and therefore affect your depth of field. Now, lens mounted ND filters do come with their own host of problems. The first of which is going to be vignetting. You tend to get a dark circle around the outside of your image, which, if that's not the look that you're going for, it can start to look a bit unappealing. So that's one thing you have to focus on. They tend to be more affected when you have a low cost ND filter as opposed to higher end ND filters. Another issue that you tend to run into is if you buy a ND filter that has a diameter of say 52 millimeters, then you can't use that adapter on lenses that have a larger diameter than that, because there is not enough of the filter to cover a larger lens with a larger diameter. You can use it on smaller lenses, but it means you have to buy step down rings in order to actually fit that larger ND filter on a smaller lens. So if you've got a whole range of different lenses, you can see where that can start to get a bit messy in terms of your gear collection. Now, comment number 4, we have audio. Now, it's no secret that DSLR cameras and mirrorless cameras and hybrid cameras are very poor when it comes to audio quality, and justifiably so. They're not really made for you to be doing any sort of high-end audio production within your video. They're mainly just there to be used as scratch audio or emergency audio if you literally have nothing else with you. But in terms of using a DSLR camera, for example, as your primary audio source, you're not going to get the best result. Now, granted, there are adapters you can buy because most hybrid cameras or DSLR cameras tend to only have the one 3.5mm input for a microphone, but you can get adapters that run XLR cables in or powered by a phantom power. But again, you still have to pass that through the built-in camera's preamps on the hybrid camera, the DSLR camera, and the built-in preamps in these cameras are not very good. Now, of course, the solution to this problem is to record your audio separately and then sync it in post. Like for me, for example, I either shoot my audio using, of course, my microphone that runs into either my external recorder, my Tascam DR40, or I run it into my Behringer mixer, depending on what I'm using. But I never ever run any of my audio. I only use the camera's audio for scratch audio, and then I record all of my audio separately and then sync it up in post. Cinema cameras, on the other hand, are made with audio in mind. So when we look at offerings such as Sony, Canon, Blackmagic, a lot of these cinema cameras have got XLR built in, they've got phantom power built in, they've got wave monitoring built in. So all of these features that you will not get or even find, especially in a low to mid-range DSLR camera or hybrid camera, you will find these as default in a cinema camera. So having good built-in audio option controls within the cinema camera is very beneficial for people like myself who tend to operate as a one-man band or find themselves in a lot of run-and-gun type of situation where you haven't always got time to set up external audio and sync up everything there and then. So it's always very good to have built-in good quality audio that you can rely on as the camera as your primary audio source without having to sync up in post later. It also makes your editing process in post-production a lot quicker because you haven't got to worry about any sync ups or syncing up different audio sources from different people. You can normally run at least at the bare minimum 2 inputs into your cinema camera from 2 different subjects. You haven't got to worry about syncing them up separately. You can sync it all up together, mix it down in camera, and it's ready to pretty much go in your editing program, and you can simply just focus on the visual aspect of the editing. So comment number 3, we have battery life. Now, a lot of cinema cameras tend to have really good battery life, especially the cameras that you're going to find from the Canon lineup. They've been known to have battery life that could last on one battery 6 to 7 hours per shoot, which is a really good amount of time if you're going to be shooting from dusk till dawn. It means you can carry a lot less batteries, therefore you have a lot less weight. Now, when it comes to mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras, though they have improved over the last few years when it comes to battery life, you're going to find yourself carrying a lot of batteries with you because they're small form factor cameras, so they can only really take small batteries. Now, there is ways you can work around this like I do. I tend to take power banks with me so I can actually charge the batteries whilst I'm there, or I can actually run the camera off a power bank, say like a 10,000 or 20,000 milliamp hour power bank without any issues, but it means I have to actually run a cable from the camera to the power bank, which can really start to get messy and start to get in the way of your shooting. There are times when I found myself on long shoots where I've been panicking, thinking, have I got enough batteries with me? Am I starting to run out already? How much longer am I going to be shooting for? So that becomes less of a concern with a cinema camera. So comment number 2, we have video options. Now, when it comes to video options, there isn't really much in the way when it comes to hybrid cameras or DSLRs. It tends to be a lot of the time just be an MP4 file at 8-bit color, which doesn't really allow you to have much room when it comes to color grading. Because when you start to grade that file, it really tends to start to break down and degrade, especially when you start to do any heavy grading work on that particular video file. Now, when it comes to cinema cameras and their options of video, you have things like variable frame rates. You have things like the option to shoot in ProRes RAW, or even full RAW at different compression rates. You have incredibly high amounts of dynamic range, so you can literally push and pull that dynamic range as much as you like, pretty much. And then you also have the option to have a lot greater color depth, so you can get up to 10 and 12-bit color when it comes to cinema cameras, and that allows you to have so much more room when it comes to color grading without degrading the overall image. Now, for someone like myself who wants to take color grading a lot more seriously, having the option there to do a lot more color work without having to be cautious about degrading or destroying the image is definitely a bonus in my book. So comment number 1, we have form factor and interface. Now, when it comes to video and the form factor and the interface, the cinema cameras definitely take the cake on this one. when it comes to video form factors on DSLR cameras or even on your mirrorless cameras, the interface can be fairly clunky when it comes to video options. You have to search through different menus to find something as basic as like the shutter speed, whereas on your cinema camera, all of those buttons that you need are on the side of the camera. So there's a button for ISO, there's a button for shutter speed, there's a button for your ND filter controls, there's a button for white balance. So having those buttons there on the side of the camera is a lot better than having to search for the menu and trying to find where they are on the interface of a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. And again, for someone like myself who tends to be a one-man band, always shooting on the fly, having those buttons there to access really quick is definitely a plus for me. So now guys, that's pretty much been the top 5 reasons as to why I'm looking to switch from using a mirrorless camera to a cinema camera. It's still something that's currently in the works. I'm still trying to weigh up my options here and there to decide what is the best solution for me. If you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them down in the comment section down below. If you like the video, be sure to give it a big like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell so you're aware when we upload videos to this channel. Anyway guys, thank you for watching, take care, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.